okay, the Frankenstein monster in this movie actually does not do that, unlike another Frankenstein monster. This is Frankenstein vs. Baragon, also known as Frankenstein Conquers the World in the United States. It was released in 1965, and at this point the Godzilla franchise is at its prime, and Toho has pretty much nailed how to make these kinds of movies, for better or for worse. The movie opens up in Nazi Germany near the end of World War II, in 1945. A German scientist has the immortal heart of the Frankenstein monster. How he got that is never explained. So the heart is stolen and taken to Hiroshima, where a group of Japanese scientists want to experiment on it to try and help make their soldiers immortal. And given the fact that it's in Hiroshima and this is the year 1945, you kind of know what's going to happen. So before long, the atom bomb drops, killing all the scientists and supposedly destroying the heart. As I've said in one of my earlier reviews, all but the last 3 reviews I'll be doing for this series of reviews were directed by Ishiro Honda, and given that he really likes to put in the message of how the atom bomb is bad, this is probably the only science fiction movie he's done where he actually gets to use the Hiroshima bombings in the film. But anyway, 15 years go by, and reports of a young Caucasian boy running around Hiroshima eating small animals has started to come about. The boy is suddenly captured and taken to a group of scientists led by American actor Nick Adams. They come to the conclusion that this boy was mutated from the immortal heart of Frankenstein. And yes, it is common knowledge that the public will mistaken Frankenstein for the monster and not the scientist. However, this is one instance where it's okay to call the monster Frankenstein. So soon the scientists start experimenting on Frankenstein. He develops a bond with one of the scientists, played by Kumi Mizuno, but before long, Frankenstein escapes and heads towards the mountains of Japan. So the 3 scientists have to go after him and recapture him before the military kills him. As if that wasn't much of a conflict for this movie already, a subterranean dinosaur called Baragon starts popping up in mountainside villages, eating all the animals and humans there. And before you know it, the 2 monsters face off and have a big fight. This movie right here is one of Toho's more recognizable monster movies without Godzilla, but I actually don't think it's one of their best. I mean, I'll say right now, it's good, and it's definitely a hell of a lot better than Atragon, but I don't think it's really that all impactful. But the story of how this movie got made was pretty interesting. Originally, stop-motion animator Willis O'Brien, who worked on films like The Lost World and the original King Kong, came up with an idea for a movie called King Kong Meets Frankenstein. Basically, King Kong was going to fight a giant monster created by Dr. Frankenstein. Toho got the rights to that idea and decided, you know what? We want to swap the Frankenstein monster with one of our own monsters, Godzilla. And thus, King Kong vs. Godzilla was created. But Toho still wanted to make a movie with the Frankenstein character, so they had a couple of different ideas floating around. They had Frankenstein versus the human vapor, they had Frankenstein versus Godzilla, none of which actually came true. But thanks to American producer Henry G. Saperstein, who was responsible for the American distribution of a lot of the Godzilla movies throughout the 60s, he helped get this movie made. I really like the design of Frankenstein in this movie. Obviously, the head is very reminiscent to the Boris Karloff Frankenstein from Universal, but I like that the depiction of this monster is more like an innocent child rather than an actual monster. And because this creature's designed through makeup and not an actual suit, it's easier to connect with this thing. You can tell when it's sad, you can tell when it's happy, you can feel sorry for this thing. It's really one of the more expressive monsters that Toho has created, and the fight scenes with Frankenstein and Baragon are actually pretty impressive. I think this might be one of the few fight scenes in Toho's catalog that was not filmed in high speed. In order to make the monsters appear much bigger, they slowed down the action by filming the fight scenes in high speed. But here, the fight scene's a lot more fast-paced, and I think that also plays into the fact that these 2 monsters are actually not as big as like Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, or King Ghidorah. If you really compare the monsters' sizes, Frankenstein and Baragon are a lot smaller than Godzilla. So it makes sense for the fight scenes to be this fast-paced. Baragon is a really unique creation. In America, Baragon is a lesser-known monster. I mean, he's certainly popular, but he is super popular in Japan. So popular that he actually stayed in Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, when one of the original monsters for that movie, Anguirus, who's more popular here, was replaced by King Ghidorah. So that just goes to show how popular Baragon actually is, even if the only other movie he appeared in was a cameo in Destroy All Monsters. But again, Baragon is pretty cool. He's a small dinosaur that can burrow underground. He breathes fire. And yes, it is legitimate fire. It's not atomic breath like Godzilla has. And going back to the fight scenes, there's something about it that just seems much cooler for just a guy in makeup to fight a guy in a suit. That just seems like a really cool thing that I would love to do one day. Never getting the chance, but what can you do? The score by Akira Ifukube, who is basically to Ishiro Honda what John Williams is to Steven Spielberg. It's really impressive. There are a couple of themes that are very memorable, but it's not quite as memorable as some of the Godzilla scores he's done. But it is better than Atragon. So at this point in the whole review series, Atragon is pretty much the low point in terms of the movies that I like. Speaking of the low points, let's just segue into what I didn't like about the movie. One thing is Nick Adams. Nick Adams is an actor that I mainly know through Toho movies, like mainly Invasion of the Astro Monster, where he played an astronaut, and then I saw him in minor roles in films like Rebel Without a Cause and Pillow Talk. Given that his roles are usually kind of tough guy roles in a way, it's really weird to see him play a scientist in this movie when, honestly, he doesn't look the part. And as for the other characters, while actors like Kumi Mizuno do a good job, it is hard to connect with them or even care about them. But then again, finding characters to really care about in these movies is really hard after the original Godzilla. As much as I love Baragon as a whole and the fight scenes are cool, when you really look at the entire movie, Baragon feels more like an afterthought. More like they just needed to have a monster fight in the movie. I'm grateful that they put him in, but if you took Baragon out of the movie, the idea of Frankenstein running away and being sought after by the scientists or the military is interesting enough on its own. So Baragon, if he had been cut out, he probably would not have been missed, but then again, there would be no Baragon. One of the more famous things about this movie was actually something that never made it into the movie. Henry G. Saperstein wanted Toho to film an ending exclusive to the American version, where a giant octopus pops up and fights Frankenstein after he has killed Baragon. The reason was because he and some of the other producers were so impressed by the giant octopus sequence in King Kong vs. Godzilla. So they begged Toho to make this alternate ending for them, even if it makes no sense at all for a giant octopus to be in the mountains. Obviously, in the end, the scene was not used, but this is not a case where it's a story that's lost and there's no footage of it. No. Outside of a picture, this entire sequence was shot, edited, and completed, and it actually exists. If you find the American DVD, it's on there, and I'd recommend giving it a watch. I don't particularly like that ending myself because, again, it makes no goddamn sense for a giant octopus to pop up in the middle of the mountains. And plus, when you look at the octopus, it's not that impressive. The reason the one in King Kong vs. Godzilla worked was because it was a mixture of a fake and real octopus. Here, it's a straight-up fake octopus. Frankenstein vs. Baragon has a lot of cool moments. It can be slow at points, but Frankenstein looks cool, Baragon looks cool, and the fight scene at the end is definitely the best part of the movie. So it's good, but not great. There are better Toho movies out there. One of them we'll talk about very soon. And that's my review for Frankenstein vs. Baragon. I hope you enjoyed this review. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about the movie if and when you see it. Like, comment, subscribe, share, check out my official website, and don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, and Periscope. This is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.